Hey there and welcome. Today we're going to walk you through the setup and installation of the CK Performance Master Recalibration Kit for 480Es. Now this kit's become my go-to. It is my favorite kit that's available on the market to use, and I've been installing it into all manner of 480E builds from mild performance to all-out race, and in pretty much everything in between. I mean, you can even put it in an otherwise stock build, though it's probably not as critical for one of those, but anything beyond stock, if you're going to be doing a little bit of racing, you're going to be doing a little bit of heavy-duty towing and hauling, or a lot of those things, this kit is a great option for consideration for your build. So we'll get a little bit closer to the bench. I'll walk you through all the different parts and components. We'll take a quick peek at the instructions. I'll explain, at least from my point of view, the rationale for why each part and piece of kit was included, so that you have a broader understanding of everything that's going on. So let's go ahead and get started. So the kit will come with a set of instructions. These are also available online. If I have it, I'll put a link in the description so that you can, grab and review them. But essentially, it'll have a list of contents here along with a summary, and then it'll start walking you through everything you need to do. So some diagrams and instructions for the pump cover, some information and directions for making lube mods, and I'll show you those in a minute. And then it also has information on dual feeding the direct clutch, which this kit has all the provisions you need to do that. So we'll walk through that as well, and you'll actually see that being done. And then it also has some other information that you need to know, diagrams, information on setting up your thrust washer for your output carrier, rear case bushing, and valve body diagrams, along with a calibration rubric for different levels of build, so that you can adjust your shift speeds appropriately for your intended application. So, here in brief, you want to consider converter stall, rear gear ratio, vehicle weight, and of course, intended use case. So this last page covers check balls, so check ball locations in the case. You're not going to be using all 9, so like I said, we'll go over all that when the time comes. Alright, so I showed you the component list, and you'll see them again as we move through the assembly process. But first thing I want to cover straight away are going to be lube mods. So here is your pump body, and this is the drain back location where you want to drill it out to 1/4 of an inch. Alright, I do that on all 480Es regardless of intended application or power level. Alright, the next mod you're going to do is going to be to your coast clutch drum here. This is going to facilitate greater lube flow to your overdrive roller clutch assembly, and you're going to make a corresponding modification to the same lube hole here in the stator shaft. So 1/8 or 125 thousandths, and then you're going to come over here and you're going to drill a 55 thousandths lube hole here, so that you can achieve full-time line to lube. Okay, and then of course you're going to install new bushings and machine the surface if you need to. Alright, center support. Some of these supports for later models, 97 and up, they'll have a relatively narrow feed hole there. So, for lubrication, you want to drill that out to at least 125. Someone had already drilled this particular center support out to, it looks like 150 or so, something like that, which is fine. The more lube, the better. So you're going to have return oil coming through. It's been cooled by the internal and or external cooler. You want that lubrication to flow as quickly and as robustly as possible to lubricate your rear gear set. Alright, last lube modification that I'll show you is going to be to the direct drum. See if I can get that into focus. So right here is going to be a 55 thousandths auxiliary bleed orifice. So you're going to have your main bleeder ball capsule here, and you just want to shake it. Just make sure this ball moves around. If it doesn't, shoot some brake cleaner in there, and then move it around. Make sure that it's not totally seized, and then otherwise you'll set up this for high RPM use, so that you have zero concerns about drag or centrifugal apply when you're shifting through first and second gear in a drag race or street strip type application, or really any instance where engines are going to be revving at 6,000 RPM or higher. All right, So let me get the drum and pump body off the bench. Toast touch drum, I don't need that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of going to go in the order that I would normally proceed with if I was just building the transmission straight away. So I already have the piston installed in the center support. We have the high rate return springs along with our heavy duty spring retainer and snap ring. So that's the first thing I'm going to assemble. Then we're going to move to the direct drum. I'll point out a couple of things as it relates to the sprag, but I'm not going to show the assembly or installation of that. I mean, it has really nothing to do with the CK kit. Just a couple of tips that would be helpful for you to know, and then we'll proceed to the pump and then finish off with the valve body, and then I'll give final thoughts at that time. And so the center support is going to take 12 return springs. You don't want to ever use less than 12, whether using the stock spring retainer or something like this. So in TH400s, you'll have, on most of them that I've seen, only a 3-spring setup. Many of them have a plastic retainer, and frankly it's very flimsy. It's designed to be used with the stamped steel piston that's installed in many of those transmissions. Some variants have a traditional aluminum piston, especially the early ones, and they will take 12 return springs, and it's my recommendation that for anything beyond just a very low RPM factory type application, I would recommend you install all 12 regardless. Now, Chris at CK has a further argument for using high rate return springs in pretty much all your builds, and his argument makes sense, and it basically goes as follows. When apply oil starts to move the piston with factory spec return springs, and the tension that they are as installed by GM, the pressure from the apply circuit will begin to move the piston before there's a critical amount of volume of fluid in that circuit. What that means is the clutch pack will begin to compress slightly prematurely, and as a result you have what's called a designed-in slip. Now, you're not going to feel this. It's not like a traditional slip where somebody's telling you, hey, my transmission's slipping, it's sliding, it's not catching. You're not going to feel it, but it's happening. The high rate return springs pretty much prevent this partial apply by ensuring that a critical mass or volume of fluid is present before this piston starts to move. And then once it does move, the apply is instantaneous. So the application, I should say, is damn near instant. And here we're talking about fractions of a second. So, to kind of give you a broad strokes illustration, with the factory springs, this shift speed may take 3/4 of a second. Of that 3/4, approximately 1/4 of a second is spent in what we call designed-in slip mode, because the piston is starting to move when there's not enough fluid to truly compress it so that the clutch is holding. With the high rate return springs, the shift speed is still going to be maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of a second, but 100% of that time is spent during application once the piston does start to move. So you reduce the amount of designed-in slip that all automatic transmissions have with respect to applied elements by a significant amount. And yes, 1/4 of a second is a significant amount. So when you're calibrating your shift speeds, based on how you're drilling the spacer plate and what you're doing with accumulators and so forth, things in the valve body as well, you want to take that into consideration with respect to the use of high rate return springs, and CK's rubric does take all of that into account. So anyway, that's a little tidbit for you on why high rate return springs are used in the intermediate and direct clutches in TH400s 480Es, and for anything that's going to see some RPM where the engine is making good power, you want to install them and set aside the factory return or release springs. Alright, so I'm going to go to the press, install our snap ring here, and then we'll be done with the center support more or less. Well, not technically, we have to install our sealing rings, and then we'll be done. Alright, got the snap ring installed. You just want to make sure that it's installed fully all the way into the groove, all the way around. Once you confirm that, you're good to proceed to the next step, which for us is going to be installing our Teflon sealing rings. So we're going to be dual feeding the direct clutch. As mentioned during the intro, the CK Performance provides you everything you need to do that. And dual feeding the direct clutch is literally a 3-step process, and it is so simple. So we're only going to be installing 3 sealing rings on the stator for the center support. We're going to put one here, and one down here. We're not going to install one here in this groove. So that's why we only have 3 instead of 4. In the direct drum, we're going to leave the center seal out. That's it. Just leave the center seal out. And then lastly, when we get to that point, we're going to install this little 3/8 of an inch cup plug into the high reverse feed passage in the case. So that corresponds to this passage right here in the center support. Put a little red Loctite on there on the outer diameter of that cup plug and seat it with a drift. And like I said, we'll show you that. That'll be literally the last thing we do in this video. Alright, we have aircraft flying overhead, so yeah, I'm sorry about that. Gets a little noisy, but hopefully it passes over quickly. Hint, hint to the pilot. I don't like it when there's all kind of background noise going on and you're trying to film something, and these people should be more considerate, right? I mean, how dare they disrupt your video session? So I don't know what this guy's doing, but almost sounds like he's flying in circles or something. And maybe he's looking to take out a target on the ground or crop dusting, I don't know. Alright, so 45-degree angle pick, just maneuver your sealing rings into their respective grooves. You want to be careful, obviously, you don't want to cut the sealing ring. The bottom one is always the most difficult to install because it's got to negotiate the greatest distance, and there's going to be a tendency for it to want to either twist, flip over, or get a little bit too oversized to where it makes resizing it more difficult. And this one expanded fairly significantly, but if you use your hands like so, you can get it to where it's ready for your sizing tool without too much trouble. So this is the sizing tool that we're going to be using. It's going to be Kent Moore J38736-7. You can find this on eBay. I get a lot of questions about where I get my specialty tools, on viewers here on the channel as well as elsewhere, where I'll post pictures of my work on internet forums or Facebook tech support groups. And wherever there's a special tool that's featured, inevitably I'll get a question around where can I buy this tool? How much was it? Where can I get it? I can't find it. eBay is going to be your best bet, okay? Bar none, for any transmission specialty tools, you want to search eBay. The other alternative is Freedom Racing. They usually have things in stock. However, just be warned, Freedom Racing is not cheap. It is not for the budget conscious builder. You're paying full retail and then some. Like if a particular tool is rare, hard to find, out of production, and it's used to perform an essential task, they are going to make you pay. I mean, you will pay through the nose. So that also applies to Adapt-A-Case. Adapt-A-Case makes great tools, but you are paying a lot of money for those tools. To give you an example, a 6R140 transmission has sealing rings that have to be resized. Those sealing rings are present on the pump stator and the PTO gear. Okay, pump stator, PTO gear, as well as the input shaft. Not unlike this one, except for LEDs, to my knowledge, never came equipped with a PTO. But suffice to say, Adapt-A-Case sells the sizing tools for the stator and the turbine shaft. I don't know if they sell a tool for the sealing rings that go on the PTO gear and those pumps for PTO equipped units. But needless to say, if you want to have all 3 tools in your toolkit, all 3 sizing tools, it's an expander and sizer combination for each, man, you're paying like something like $1,500. $1,500 to have those tools. So if anyone on this channel is also a Ford person and maybe thinking about getting into the 6R140s, you know, just a little bit of FYI for you. And that really, I'm bringing that up only to support my assertion that Adaptacase, because their Adaptacase tools are simply super expensive. You can get them on Freedom Racing, of course. Like I said, lots and lots of money. It's up to you if you want to spend it. If you're going to be doing those transmissions, I mean, they're good units to work on. They're relatively simple. Not a whole lot of, you know, complexity to them. Just a few things you need to know. But, you know, I guess you can say that about any transmission. But, you know, if you're a builder, they will be profitable for you. And there is a whole lot of trucks with those transmissions in them. Heavy duty Ford Super Duty type deals. 250s up to 750s, and they go bad, you know, just as much as any other transmission. So, all right, so there you have it. Leave this alone. You can machine this entire groove off with a on a lathe if you want, if you have the tooling that would be required. I don't, but I've never done it, and I'll be honest, I don't know what the value is, you know, if it's the juice is worth the squeeze of doing that. It's one of those things where if it's up to you, you can do it quickly, then by all means. If not, I wouldn't worry about it. So this little bearing race goes here. You want to lube up your bushing. Always install new bushings everywhere in your transmission. Don't skimp on that. Alright, so this part of the bearing race, the rear race and the bearing itself, sit on the top of the sun gear or the front of the sun gear, and then you have your thrust washer that goes in the back of the center support. So we'll get that installed so that the center support will be 100% ready to go into the case when the time comes. So I got two complete 4L80E rebuild video series on the channel. One's more or less a stock build. We're not installing any fancy kits. I think I call it the 4L80E basic build. It's a 4-part series. And then the other one is more of a performance oriented build, and I believe I feature this kit in that video as well. I think that was being built for like a 5.3 twin turbo application in an early 2000s GMC Sierra. So, you know, the guy was doing a 4L80E swap in place of the 4L60 because he wanted to race the truck. All right, so check your journal and your race here for your low roller clutch. Of course, you would do that during teardown inspection, and then just make sure that there's no blockages in any of your intake locations. So that is the center support. So now we'll go ahead and move to the direct drum. I'm going to go ahead and install the race. I'll cover a quick tip for you. If you're used to watching my videos, or you know a little bit about transmissions, you probably already know where I'm going with this. But if you don't, and you have a dog bone style sprag with your outer race, it's always a good idea to take 320 grit sandpaper and just go all the way around, you know, a bunch of times, so that you can reintroduce that cross hatching on the sprag bearing surface. Okay, that removes any glaze, maybe knocks down some uneven spots. You know, obviously they would have to be very, very, very small, but what it really does for you is it freshens up the surface so that this new sprag has something nice to bite into. So these little preparatory steps can go a long way. The other thing to consider is the coast band surface on the drum itself. So what I did earlier is take a 400 grit sheet of sandpaper like so, and I just went all the way around, you know, rotating the drum periodically so I get the surface even, and I just removed the glaze. So in this thing's previous life, it was probably used in a towing or hauling capacity when I tore down the unit. In fact, I think that video is on the channel for this transmission. It's called Jasper 4L80E Teardown or something like that. You know, this surface had a lot of wear marks from the coast band. All right, so let me go ahead and install the sprag, and then we'll come back and go ahead and set up our drum, and we'll measure clutch clearance via the center support. We're going to be using 6 frictions, 6 steels, no cushion plate, and of course our machine TH400 piston. All right, now we can start working on the direct drum. So as mentioned, you're going to leave the drum seal out, and you're running real high RPM. Good idea to go ahead and install that bleeder, or drill that bleed, I should say, 50 to 55 thousandths. Jake's Performance advises he can go up to 65 thousandths, or I should say you can go up to 65 thousandths. That's what he does. I would not go any more than that. 65 thousandths is probably the max I'd go, and 40 thousandths is probably the minimum I'd go. Anywhere in that range should be fine and give you the necessary auxiliary exhaust system to prevent clutch drag or centrifugal apply when you're zooming through the gears in first and second. So a lot of RPMs are generated, and this drum spins like something like 10 times engine speed, maybe more. Chris told me, I admit I forget, but it is, it is really moving, around the center line. So you want to mitigate any concerns when it comes to clutch drag by use of high rate return springs and drilling that little bleed orifice. An enormous volume of fluid goes into the direct clutch when it's being applied, so you shouldn't have any concerns about losing pressure in the circuit, especially in a dual feed situation, as long as you keep your orifice size there to 65 thou or less. I've drilled at 65 before. I've been using 50 as of late. Either one should be fine. All right, so let's talk about this piston real quick. It's a TH400 direct clutch piston. Pretty standard fare. Casting number is going to be 8623709, and this piston has been machined with a deck height of 574 thousandths of an inch. So where I'm measuring this is right here, just like that. On the back of the piston, you notice there's a little bit of a recess, and there's these 3 bosses. I'm not measuring it anywhere there. I'm only measuring it on this raised circumferential radius. And then I'm going right to the deck height. That's 575 thousandths of an inch. Alright, assembly lube. Go ahead and coat your sealing surfaces, and when you're drilling this hole, I should make a remark about this. The location is important in terms of where this will sit relative to the lip seal position. The lip seal position is going to seal right here. You'll notice there's a transition zone. Well, maybe you'll notice, let me see if I can get that a little bit closer. There's a little bit of a transition zone right here. You can see it where my pick is pointing. So you want the hole below that transition zone. If the hole is too high on the sealing surface, it'll actually interfere with the seal itself, and the seal will cover it, and you're not going to get the effect that you need. And there may be other detrimental impacts as well, so again, be mindful of that. Alright, lip seal tools are available everywhere. Transmission parts are sold. They can be bought online as well from places like Whatever It Takes Performance Transmission, Transparts Warehouse, Trans Deals for You, Nat Pro, TransStar. I mean, you name it, you could probably buy all the tools you need, you know, for transmission building from those retailers. Okay. The real specialized stuff, you know, the Kent Moore dealership tools, eBay is going to be your best resource there for both availability as well as, you know, value. But your tools that are in production now, you can get those through TransStar. Alright, this lip seal can be kind of tricky. In fact, let me check it. If I nicked it, I'm going to replace it, and I nicked it. So let me put a new seal on here, and then we'll go ahead and install it. Alright, so I guess my little mistake afforded me an opportunity to show you something. So all of these lip seals have numbers. They have little part numbers that, well, you're going to have to, you know, really eyeball them to see clearly. I'm going to zoom in. You can see the part number here. If you can't see it, I'll read it to you. It is 295-20292. 295-20292. This corresponds to a forward or direct clutch piston outer perimeter lip seal. The center support seal that goes on the outer diameter of that piston has a different number. I don't know offhand what it is. If I can find one in this bag of extra seals, I'll annotate the video, but suffice to say, you don't want to mix them up. So let's go ahead and try that again, and use a little bit more assembly lube. So it's always a good idea to have extra seals around too. If you do 4L80Es, at least occasionally, you're going to have extras, because one paper rubber kit covers all year's 4L80E. So if, let's just say you get one and it's a 97 and up unit, it's going to have bonded pistons, you're not going to use the lip seals that come in that kit. So you want to save those in the event you make a mistake like I did and you have an extra to go back with, versus having to buy a whole new paper rubber kit. I mean, that would suck. I'm going to say those kits are, if not $100, pretty close to it. They're not cheap. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm holding this piston a little bit more level than it was previously. And I just want to be a little bit more careful when I install it using the lip seal tool. Alright. Let's make sure it's in there. Hopefully that was in the shot. If not, I apologize. Probably should have been if I had zoomed out. Again, that's the problem with filming sometimes. You just forget stuff like that. I'm focused on what I'm doing, and I'm not focused on the task at hand when it comes to the filming bit, so it's like I'll forget to zoom out and you miss, you know, miss something important. We have a piece of the old seal there. Alright, so again, if that wasn't in the shot, I do apologize. That is my bad. Hopefully that's not enough to cause you to dislike the video. You know, dislikes do hurt the algorithm. Basically, YouTube, for those that are not familiar with it from a content creator perspective, YouTube looks at a few different factors or a few different metrics to determine how widely to share your video. When you first publish a video on YouTube, it's automatically shared to your subscribers. So the more subscribers you have, obviously the more views you're going to get. Now, that doesn't mean that all of them are going to watch every video you publish, but suffice to say, if the video doesn't get a lot of views, then YouTube's not going to show it to anybody but your subscriber list, and may even shrink that further down. In other words, it'll start taking that video off of the home page from a sizable fraction of your subscribers you know, after the first 24 hours if the video is just not getting traction. The second factor is engagement. So engagement here means comments, likes, and shares. So they use, probably my guess is, net likes to kind of feed the algorithm so that it can compute a distribution formula for how wide it wants to share your video. If you get a lot of likes, a lot of views, the video does very well, then YouTube will start sharing it out beyond your subscriber list to people that are not subscribed to you but otherwise watch transmission building videos in hopes of netting you more subscribers. More subscribers mean more views, which of course mean more ad revenue because more ads have an opportunity to run during the videos. Anyway, sorry, I just want to kind of explain what goes on when it comes to the YouTube side and how the content creator is impacted when you have things like dislikes and you know what goes into that. All right, let me go ahead and install this and then we'll be back. All right, so that's my understanding of how the whole YouTube thing works, you know, behind the scenes. There may be a lot more to it, so I may not be telling you everything, but at least you have a basic idea of what goes on. So here's our clutch pack. It's going to be 6 steels, 6 frictions. I do have a cushion plate, and I want to just kind of talk real quick about the use of these plates. Chris at CK is a big proponent of installing them in pretty much all builds, including full race. And the reason he likes them is that the cushion plate helps the clutch pack's timing of apply in such a way that it, and I'm going to do the best I can to paraphrase him because I can't remember exactly what he said, but it cushions the application of the direct drum as it's spinning down from an extraordinarily high rate of RPMs to a much lower rate as the clutch pack grabs the direct clutch hub. That's of course part of the forward drum assembly. So if you notice here, the cushion plate is sitting as low as it possibly could in the drum without actually dipping underneath the groove that goes all the way around the bottom there at the base of these lugs. Because if you take a little too much off this piston, then you're going to have an issue with either the flat steel or the cushion dipping below the lug, and you'll have a no apply situation in this clutch. So I'm actually going to leave this in here and see what kind of clearance this generates. Now, it's a good idea to have a few forward clutch steels on the bench as well. Let me give you measurements here that you probably should know. I'll take the cushion plate out and measure that too, but 90 thousandths is what you'll have for a factory direct clutch flat steel. Your frictions are all going to be 80 thousandths. Doesn't matter what kind of frictions they are or who makes them. The forward steels are like 70 thou. Let me go grab a couple. Alright, so I have some used steels. I know I have some new ones somewhere, but I'll have to fish them out if we end up needing them. So, what did I say? 70 thousandths, so 75 thousandths. So 75 thousandths. And so you can install forward steels. In fact, if you wanted to do a 6 clutch, 6 steel stack up in an otherwise factory drum with a bonded piston, then you can just run 6 forward clutch steels. I don't know that I would do that if you're doing something more than like 600-700 horsepower, you know, or if it's a really heavy duty towing, hauling, or working application. An example would be like a snowplow truck or something. I would want thicker steels. And in my humble opinion, having the thicker steels is a little bit better than having thin steels that may be, you know, more numerous in count, but less resistant to heat. Alright, so I don't know if this is going to fly. No, it's not. So let me go ahead and take the cushion plate out, because this piston was machined with the intention of not running a cushion plate. So I may need to talk to Chris to see if he can modify his kit in any way that would allow for the use of the cushion plate and augment the instructions to talk through the rationalization around using one in a very high horsepower application, because conventional wisdom holds that cushion plates will delay the speed of the shift a little bit, and you know, while it's a, you know, maybe perfectly good reasons to do that, it does again kind of bring back or reintroduce that designed in slip that I talked about earlier. Alright, so let me measure this. And the other thing of note is that these wave plates between the forward and the direct drum are not actually the same, from my understanding. The amplitude is different on the wave. It's calibrated differently for the forward clutch than it is for this one. So this is 42 thousandths. All right. So let's see what we have when it comes to direct clutch clearance. And I'm using a Rabestis waffle friction. I don't have an extra, what do you call it, stage 1 handy. Just to be clear, it does not matter if you put like a different friction in there with your pack, say 5 stage 1s and 1 high energy. It's not going to make a damn bit of difference in terms of the functionality of the pack, or you know, whether or not it'll perform as it needs to. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through the process of measuring the distance from this ledge here to the deck surface on the waffle. Okay, not the groove, and on the waffle. I want to be on the waffle. I'm going to measure it at 4 points and then take an average. Now, I showed this in one of my other videos, you know, or actually both of my rebuild videos, and somebody had commented that this method is not accurate, and I'll beg to differ a little bit. While I generally agree with what the commenter said about using a depth micrometer instead of a dial caliper to do this, in all my years of using the dial caliper method, I've never had an issue with being able to get consistent readings as long as I take 2 or 3 measurements at the same spot, and I am extra careful about ensuring that the bottom here of the caliper is as level as I can get it. Because if my readings are all over the place, I know I'm just canting the caliper, and that's no good. But if you take 2 or 3 measurements and they're consistent, then you're not going to have an issue with being able to get a reasonably materially accurate reading there for your distance or drop from that ledge to the top of the friction. So clearance here we want to shoot for is between 55 and 70 thousandths. If you're in that neighborhood, you'll be fine. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down just like that. And I'm going to look at my dial indicator, and it says 15 thousandths. So we'll do it again. And again, we want to be on the waffle. So 15, maybe 16. So I'm going to record 16 thou. I'm going to come across the opposite side and do the exact same thing. And then I'm going to take 2 more measurements, and then I'll average them. If you get a wildly different reading from one side to the other, assume that the measurement you just took is probably not accurate, and just do it again. Okay, that's 10 thousandths, so again, wildly different. So that was probably in a groove. Or maybe not, that's 10 thou. So I'm going to record 10 for now. It could be that this one is the one that's off. I mean, not that 5 thousandths of an inch is a huge spread, mind you, but you want to aim for consistency. So here's 15. Or actually it's 14. I'm going to record 14 there. And I'll go to the other side. The more measurements you take, the more accurate your overall average measurement will be. Nah, it looks like it's 13. Yeah, 13 or 14. I'll go ahead, I'll record 14. So what do we have? 10, 16, and 2 instances of 14 thousandths. All right, and feel free to skip over this part. I mean, it goes without saying, but if the measurement process is a little too cumbersome for you, you know, a little too boring, then feel free to skip over it. All right, so that's giving me an average drop, if you will, of, I'm going to call that 14 thousandths. I'll round up, that's fine. So I'll come over here to my little template where I record everything. It's a direct clutch, so I'm just going to call this ledge to friction. All right, and that line across the top indicates it's an average figure. Now I'll just put a 4 in parentheses to indicate how many measurements I took. All right. All right, so I'm going to fire up the air compressor, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put some air and take a measurement. Now, because we're dual feeding, we have no center seal in the drum. What we need to do is find something to plug this high reverse feed passage so that we can go ahead and keep air in the circuit. Otherwise, it'll just come right out of that circuit as soon as it goes in the direct feed. There we go. All right, let me fire up the compressor, and then we'll go ahead and we'll take a measurement from basically the travel of the backing plate from where it sits on the ledge to the underside of the snap ring. All right, air's on, dial indicator's been set up. So we're going to take 4 readings on the plate, basically measuring backing plate travel from the ledge to the underside of that snap ring. And what we need to do is use some means to plug one of these 2 feed passages so that we can put air. Otherwise, air will just come right out the other one. All right, so we had an average of 14 thousandths travel, or I should say ledge drop. So we really want to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 thousandths, 40 to 45, maybe 50 thousandths. So let's just call it between 40 and 50, and you know, we'll see how we do. So all you really need is about 50 to 70 psi of air. I mean, you know, just enough to get the thing moving and fully applied. And once I force air out, I need to get some more punch. Because I can't grip the center support and the punch adequately with that other longer one. Even this one's a little too long, but we're gonna have to make it work. All right, everything's in view. All right, 30 thou. I'm actually going to switch sides here because whoever did the dual feed, they installed a set screw into the case at that high reverse feed passage, and I think they nicked this this passage itself, and so it's causing air to bleed in. So that's 30 thousandths. I mean, I don't have reason to believe it's going to be any different on, you know, any other position, so I'm going to just rotate the drum just to be sure, go 180 out, but 30 thousandths is not going to cut it. That would leave us 44 thousandths of clearance, which is a little too loose for my tastes. want to see at least 50, so. But I can't discount using this clearance totally, because if I put a steel, a forward steel, and it's too loose, then, well, I'd rather be on the side of too tight, just because we have plenty of assurance here against centrifugal apply. I think it'll be okay in the end, but it's not ideal. Yeah, it's 30 thousandths. This is very difficult to get this this thing to work. I'm going to try it again. We're at 1 thou, so 29 thousandths in reality. Maybe 30 there. Alright, I'm going to call that 30 thousandths. So we're going to put one of these forward clutch steels in and see what kind of effect that has on our overall clearance. And again, having one forward steel and an otherwise, 6 clutch, 6 steel stack consisting of mostly direct clutch frictions is not the end of the world, not at all. Perfectly fine to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put that steel at the very bottom against the piston, because on the piston side you're not going to have nearly as much heat as you would on a clutch facing side, clutch disc. So again, the transmission is adequately taken care of. It's got fluid that it needs, and it's got good airflow, good cooling capacity. Then it really doesn't make a difference where you put this steel, but just as out of an abundance of caution, that's what I'm going to do. So I happen to have a bottom steel that was in a 480E forward drum, so I'm just going to stick it in here. This steel is actually in perfect shape, needs basically no prep work. So if I can't find a new steel, then I'm just going to run with this. So what you see here is typical transmission building, these little kind of hurdles that you have to overcome, work your way around to get where you want to go. Stacking clutches up sometimes requires multiple iterations to get it where it needs to be. It's obviously worth taking the time to do so that your transmission doesn't go out the door impaired in any way. Alright, let's see. So what actually, I'm not even thinking here. I'm not going to measure travel. I need to measure ledge drop. So it's the ledge drop that has to increase, because our travel is going to be fixed at 30 thousandths. Some of you guys are already racing to the comments. No, dude, that's not how you make your adjustment in your measurements. You need to measure the ledge drop. What the hell's wrong with you? Automatic thumbs down. Alright, let me wipe all these numbers off. So 29 to 30 thousandths is the number we're working with for now between backing plate and underside of snap ring. So let's see what sort of numbers we get. And I'm going to write an orange marker instead of green, and I'm also going to change the camera angle so that you have a better view of things. Alright, now a little bit better. Alright, ledge drop, take 2. So now we're at 32 thousandths. Go 180 out. Do that again. I think I screwed that up. Or maybe not. This is 20. Let me measure this one again. And this is giving me 40. So this kind of goes to the argument that you really want to use a depth micrometer as opposed to a dial caliper for doing this. Getting 25. So I'm going to record 40 over here. And 25 over there. Before I do, let me just take one more measurement over this, because I'm not convinced this is right. Okay, I'm getting 25 again. Okay, 40 I think is in the groove. Yeah, I'm in the groove there as well. So I think 25 is the real number. Maybe not. This is giving me 45 and it was on a waffle. So like I say, I totally get and agree to a large extent with that feedback given to me by that other poster, you know, that the guy that made that comment. Because, I mean, we have some wildly different numbers here, and that could indicate that one of these steel is not actually flat, and it would likely be the one that I added. So this is 35. That's 40. So 70 thousandths is fine. And this is 30. And now we're 35. Okay, so that's a little bit more consistent. I'm going to measure that over there again. Okay, I'm getting 40 now over here. So I must have been in a groove or just simply doing it wrong. So 35 and 45 cancel each other out, so you have 40 thousandths worth of travel. 29 to 30 would be 69 to 70 thousandths clearance. So again, for high RPM, you know, we're talking a delta of 25 thousandths. We had 45 thousandths with the thicker steel, and we have 70 thousandths with this steel, you know, with the forward steel. I gotta make a judgment call on this because it's like my target here is 60 thousandths, 10 thou per friction. And with the other stack up, I was getting 14 thou plus 30 thou travel. It's only 34 thousandths actually now that I'm looking at it, not 44. So this is going to be what I have to do. It's going to have to go out like this. All right. Not super in love with it, but you know, I've had them go out the door like this with you know, this kind of clearance before, even 80 thousandths, and there is no detriment, you know, no adverse impact to the you know, to the transmission, to the direct clutch. Alright, I'm going to take a few more measurements for our backing plate travel, just to see if anything changed. I don't know why I would, but just to be thorough. And again, I'm going to plug the direct feed and put air into the high reverse. 29 back to 2 thou below, 29 back to 2 thou below. So we're going to call that 29 less 2 is like 27. So that's good. 29, or now it's 30. So it's the same. So we recorded 29. $29. Alright, 29. So I'm going to just call this 29 thousandths. So we have 40 thousandths for backing plate travel, and then we have 29 thousandths for, 40 thousandths for ledge drop, and 29 thousandths for backing plate. So 69 thousandths clearance. That's not too bad. Alright, I'm going to read my chicken scratch. Probably can't. It's horrible handwriting. Absolutely abysmal. Alright, so we're going to put these two things to the side. And I'll just put them on the other bench for now. And then we can go ahead and resume with the pump. So, on to the pump. So, the only part that really concerns us with respect to the CK kit is the Stator Sport half. We're not going to do anything else with the body beyond what I already showed. So, here are all our valve trains laid out. You'll see we have a multitude of different PR springs. I'll go over what those are in a second, but starting from left to right, we have the torque converter apply valve or control valve and its spring, a plug, a roll pin, and a snap ring. The plug itself for the snap ring side's already in the in the pump stator support, and so is the TC enable valve. I actually started to assemble the pump when it dawned on me I should probably film this whole CK performance installation, because I did a quick check on my channel and realized I didn't actually have a video dedicated to this kit. I have one for the 204R, but I don't have one for the 480E. So anyway, that's why some bits are in the stator. This is going to be your torque converter clutch limit valve, and if you have a worn bore here for this valve, when you go ahead put the vehicle into either drive or reverse, you're going to stall out. Okay, if it's really worn, like where your vacuum signal is in the single digits, you're going to need to replace the stator support assembly, because I don't know of any corrective valves that are available, or even oversized valves where you can bore out the casting to fit an oversized valve so you can restore it to serviceability. But anyway, you have your roll pin, your plug, your spring, and then of course the valve itself. Here's the Sonex boost valve for 480E LB1. That is the part number. Pardon me. Comes with a snap ring. Here is the original factory outboard spring seat or washer, and then your bumper spring. And the bumper spring basically goes like so. Now let's talk about all these pressure regulator valve springs. So here's a PR valve, and then you have all the springs. This spring here is going to be the spring that comes in the Sonex 480E LB1 kit. This will raise line pressure in a linear manner, in correlation to engine RPM or throttle angle. by roughly 5 to 7% from what I understand from Sonics. So we're going to put that aside. Here's the factory original PR spring. So they look very similar. They look very similar, so I'm going to keep them separate for now. I have Sonics on the left and the factory one on the right. And then the CK kit will give you 2 PR springs. One that's calibrated more or less for a factory type setup, you know, giving you factory pressures, all other things equal, and the other one is for high performance. If I'm using this kit, chances are it's for a high performance application, and I am pretty much never installing this one, so I have a whole drawer full of those just accumulating. So this is the lineup as it will go into the unit, or I should say the pump. So I've already vacuum tested the stator support, and you know, all the vacuum readings were a-okay, no issues whatsoever. If you are a little low in the signal for the PR valve, Sonics does make a lube regulated pressure regulator valve for these pumps. Okay, it looks just like this, except it has the line to lube function or feature already designed into the valve, which means you do not want to drill this little hole right here, because if you drill that hole and you have the Sonics valve installed, you could potentially have a shortage of lubrication pressure being generated at that location there in the pump. And I say potentially because I've actually talked to someone who built his 4L80E, and he said that he had installed the Sonics line to lube valve, and he mistakenly drilled the pump cover. And he said that the transmission functioned. He said it was a little bit low on pressure, but not terribly low. And you know, when I talked to him, I asked him, well, you know, did you drill the cover? And he said, yes, I drilled it line to lube. I said, well, did you install the factory valve? And that's when he told me, no, he installed the Sonics valve. So he went and installed the factory valve, and that, you know, the pressure issue went away. And here I'm talking about when he was doing a pressure test. All right, I'm going to go ahead and install this stuff. I'm not going to show that. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. WD-40 in the bores and all over the valves. You can use transmission fluid if you want. But other than that, it's just, you know, installing valves into the cover. I mean, that's really it. All right, with the pump all done, we can get it out of the way. And we'll go ahead and focus on the valve body now. So this is the last major subassembly you're going to have to deal with when it comes to installing the CK kit. So let's go over the rubric real quick. This is a 1966 Chevy C20. The converter stall is going to be 28 to 3200, somewhere in there. I believe he's installing a 3000 stall converter. That's what he's purchasing from Circle D Specialties, but this rubric, based on my orifice sizing, will apply to anything within this range, and with like a 373 upwards of 411, really even 350 to 411 axle ratio. So I apologize, there was a lot of glare there. So this is going to be your second gear feed. So this is the whole size for second gear. Third and fourth. Second, we're doing 93 thou, same with third. And fourth, we're doing 82 thousandths. Okay, fourth gear is a very robust clutch apply, even more so than even second. So you don't need to go anywhere near as large as you would with third. And second, sometimes in between, sometimes it's the same. Here, we're going to go with the same. The higher the stall you go, the less sensitive the 1-2 upshift is to orifice sizing. That's generally true of all of the shift points, but second, it's a little bit more pronounced. Stock to very tight stalls up to, say, 2500, you really want to be conservative here, all other things equal. Third, you could do 93, that's fine. You know, assume you have something like a 2500 stall. If it's stock, I would go maybe 75, something like that. And fourth, if a stock stall or something real tight, 2000 stall, is on the menu, then maybe just leave it alone. Don't even drill it. All right, so I'm running out of battery. Got to change it out. It's about to die. When I do that, we'll go ahead and cover gaskets real quick, and then we'll go ahead and put the spacer plate and block off plate onto the valve body. So our two spacer plate gaskets are going to be the spacer plate, the valve body gasket, which is what we're going to install here, and then you have your valve body assembly / underside of spacer plate, the case gasket. So all of the 480E overhaul kits, at least the ones that come from the aftermarket, are going to use the early style spacer plate valve body assembly to case gasket. That's what they're going to give you. They're not going to give you the later one because this will work on all years 480E. For the early models that had that large feed pipe at the front of the valve body, they have a cutout here to accommodate that large orifice or inlet. The later ones obviously don't have that. The little tube that goes from the back of the valve body to lubricate the rear case bushing has nothing to do with the front of the valve body, so no circuitry there for lube. So we'll put this on the other bench, and that'll be one of the last things we do as far as the process of reassembling the transmission. Alright, so let's go ahead and refer to the instructions. I want to make sure I cover the different calibration rubrics that CK provides for you. Alright, so basically for an OEM type shift, just like he says here, ignore everything else on here when it comes to drilling. Just leave it alone. So up to 500 horsepower, second gear feeds to 93 and fourth to 82. For 750, up to 750, open up a little bit more incrementally, 110 for second and third, and then keeping fourth gear at 82. So you see, we're not really touching fourth gear or changing that figure until we get to around 1,000 horsepower. Then here we're talking 125 and a fourth gear of 90. So for tight stalls, like I mentioned, you're going to want to use something between 75 and 93 thousandths for second and third. Fourth I would leave alone, and then so on and so forth for everything else up to $1,000. And beyond that, he gives you second and third gear feeds up to 140, and the fourth gear should be no larger than 110. So, you know, here we're talking 1,200 horsepower, maybe a 5,000 stall converter, 5,500 stall, something along those lines would be applicable for that fourth level. So the block-off plate is not designed to be used with a gasket of any kind, insofar as what you would normally put on here with the factory 2334 accumulator housing, it gets a gasket. This one does not get a gasket. Jake's Performance block-off plate is the same way. You don't use a gasket. Now, the CK block-off plate is steel, and the Jake's Performance block-off plate's anodized aluminum. He gives you, I want to say, 120 or 125 inch-pounds for torque spec on all the bolts. CK is either 130 or 135, so let's refer to the instructions so that we know for sure. See, plugging the valve body. Ta-da, replate as is. And then this is the check ball rubric, we'll cover that. So here it is. Torque the mounting bolts to 130 inch-pounds. So that's what we shall do. So a little bit of assembly lube or petroleum jelly. You could use petroleum jelly if you want. If you don't have assembly lube, you for whatever reason don't have access to it, you can use petroleum jelly to assemble the transmission in its entirety. Because all this is glorified dye-colored petroleum jelly. Alright, so there's going to be Z-bolt locations. Z-bolt locations are basically locations where the plate is perfectly aligned with the gasket and the circuitry on the valve body. So what I'm going to do is just grab a couple of bolts so that I can preserve that alignment. There's one. And let's see if the instructions give you the other. but I'm drawing a blank as to exactly where it is. I mean, you can do what I'm doing as well. It doesn't hurt. All I'm doing is validating that everything bolt hole alignment wise is good. I think it's actually here. Okay. Sorry for any confusion. Alright, there we go. Third time's the charm. You'd think I'd know the orientation by heart by now, but no, I guess not. That might earn me a dislike. There goes my glove. These gloves, I mean, they're great. They're from Harbor Freight, but man, they love the tear in the webbing between the thumb and the index finger. Alright, make sure you're all buttoned up. Alright, low power impact, not going to hurt anything. Just zip them down and then we'll go ahead and torque them up. 130 inch-pounds. Alright, no particular tightening sequence. I'll typically start here, then go here, and then, you know, work my way out. And that's basically it. Okay, valve body's done. I'm going to take a look at it one last time. Good to go. Okay, the next step is to install the Torrington thrust bearing and shim kit. What we will do is I'll show the installation of that, and we'll show rear gear end play check. When I have it finally dialed in, and I'll just tell you what shims I used. And then the last thing that we're going to be doing is installing this rear cup plug when the case is fully assembled. So let's go ahead and, I mean, from your point of view it'll be instant. From my point of view, I have to probably about 20 minutes or so worth of work to get to that point, but let's go ahead and proceed and kind of wrap up the video at that point. Alright, getting to the home stretch. So we have the Sonics bushing and the TH400 bushing. TH400 bushing I generally will install with the notches facing away, or you know, facing up toward you if the case is inverted, if I'm working on a TH400. The reason for that is that we have oil grooves that are going to be facing in toward the case, and then we have a non-grooved land here that acts as like a seal. So this is a hybrid type bushing. This bushing got a little messed up anyway, I'm not sure, but anyway, we're not going to be using that. For the Sonics bushing, it doesn't matter because Sonics bushing has lubrication passages on both sides. Truth be told, it's not a big deal. If you installed a early 480E pump body bushing in this position, which doesn't have any lube passages in it at all, I mean, no harm done. I've done that countless times. Alright, just go ahead and smack it in. And then I'll turn the case upright so you can see the lip. And that lip that extends beyond the case wall here in the inner diameter is going to serve as a locator for the bearing and the shim or shims. Alright, hopefully you can see that. If not, I apologize, but how you want to orientate your bearing is just like this, with the larger outer portion facing you. Technically upside down in most cases, but not in this one. Alright, so there it is being located on that lip of the bushing. And so if you were to install it like this, zoom out a little bit. If you were to install it like this, it would be this portion here, this part of the bearing that would rotate, and this part that's facing the rear of the case would be largely unmoving. And this would be rotating directly against that lip of the bushing, and you risk wearing into the bushing, potentially decapitating it, and then the bearing will float around. Don't want that. Alright, I'm going to turn this case back inverted again, and we'll show you a real easy way to install the rear case seal and snap ring so that you're not struggling with it, potentially getting it out of square. Now hopefully that's reasonably visible. Alright, lube up your bushing beforehand. And then what you're going to do is grab another bushing driver that's roughly the width of the rear case seal. But you don't want it being wider than the seal. So here's the bushing driver I'm going to use. Here's our rear case seal. I mean, it happens to be exactly the same diameter, so you know, it works out perfect. So get it as square as you can, and then you're going to gently tap it in until you get a little bit past the deck here, but not past the snap ring groove. If you have to make little adjustments to re-square it, you can. Alright, that's getting there where I want it. Alright, so now what we're going to do is install the snap ring into this little pocket here. Now if you watch my other assembly videos on these transmissions, you probably would have seen this already, but collapse it until you can get this snap ring to situate itself into the bore and stay there. You know, maybe put your hand on it until you can get your bushing driver. Alright, now get the bushing driver on it and then start smacking it home. And when you do, the snap ring will simply snap right into the groove. And that's all there is to it. Whoever that guy was, he had either a massive exhaust leak or a rod knock in that Ford Expedition or Explorer or whatever the hell it was. Okay, lubricate the rear seal. Put plenty of lube on this seal. Don't want the journal cutting it on the output shaft. Alright, so now I'm going to assemble the gear train and we're going to drop it in I'll talk over what I like to do when it comes to the thickness of shims and like where I want to start out and where I usually end up, and then we'll go ahead, drop it in, do an end plate check, and then what I'll probably do is if I need to make an adjustment, I'll do that off camera and we'll do an end plate check again. And at that point, the band will be in the case and the gear train will have been installed for the final time. I decided to throw a quick word in about the gear train in general and then the large rear sun gear thrust bearing in particular. So these other two bearings aren't very consequential when it comes to interchangeability between early and late or even TH400s, but this one is. You'll notice that the bearing race here, as well as the 41 thou spacer, has cutouts for lubrication. Earlier bearings from the 91 through 96 4L80s and TH400s do not have this. If you do not have it in your 97 and up, there's going to be problems. So you want to make sure that you match your bearing style or design with the gear train that you're going to be using, either first generation, second generation, which is 97 and up, or third generation, if you want to call it that, the 99 and up, where they changed the planetaries. This 41 thou spacer is designed to center the sun gear between the reaction and output carrier. That's reaction, that's output. If this spacer is not in there, then the sun gear will not be centered and you will have major problems in the gear train. So you want to make sure that you don't mix and match parts. Now, if you have a 98 in back output and reaction carrier, those can retro to any year 4L80E prior to 1998, including 1998 obviously, as well as all TH400s, provided that if you're trying to do something with the speed sensor here, the tone ring, you're not in a position where you're trying to retro, or you're trying to prospectively install, I should say, a TH400 output carrier into a 4L80E where a tone ring is required, because this area here, this portion of the outer diameter, is different on a TH400 planet, and you won't be able to get the tone ring on it. It's like wider. At least I've tried, and I mean, it just won't fit. So anyway, I wanted to cut in here. I know that the gear train assembly is not a part of the CK Performance Master Recal Kit, but it's important enough information that I think you should know about it if you didn't already. And just another quick tip, make sure that you can spin your sun gear shaft over your main shaft and that there's no bind-ups. Okay, if there are, chances are it's the sun gear shaft bushings. One or more of them is a little too tight. Just use some sandpaper, clearance, whichever one it is, or both of them, until you get this sort of movement. Nice and easy. Gear train's fully assembled, so let's talk about the shim pack. So the part number that you're going to buy that comes with the bearing and the set of shims is 44200F. So you have one TH350 pump bearing and then 6 shims, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 40 thousandths. The shims that you're going to most commonly be using for TH400s 4L80Es are going to be these first 4. I've never had a scenario where I had to install 30 thousandths or even 40 thousandths worth of shims. If you find yourself in that position, just double check, make sure that everything that's supposed to be in the gear train is actually in there and everything is installed correctly. I'm not saying it's not possible. I mean, tolerance stacking can produce any number of results, but I've built, I don't know, maybe 300 TH400s 4L80Es in my life. Of those 300, not one time did I recall using a 30 or a 40 thou shim. So, had a TH400 build I just did, I ended up using a 10 thou shim. With the 4L80Es, I can't remember the last time I didn't use either a 15 or a 20. So I like to start with 15. So, as I mentioned a little bit ago, you're going to install the shim first, then the bearing, just like this, into the case. And then we're not going to install the band. My recommendation is you leave the band out for this process, just so that you don't risk damaging the band if you misinstall the gear set, or you scrape the band or something like that on the planet or whatever. You should only install your band when you're ready to go back with the gear train for the final time. Like you've taken your preliminary measurement, you've changed out your shim pack, you know, you got the shim or shims in there you want, and you have a high degree of confidence that your final reading, or your next reading I should say, will be your final reading. So you may have to have the anti-fretting ring in the case. That's already been installed. That's why you don't see it on the bench. And then you have the gear train, and here's the gear train fully assembled. So you're going to need a lifting tool or a set of vice grips that you usually see being used in welding or metalworking type settings. And the vice grips are such that the ends will come right up in here and grab where this tool is grabbing, and you can lower the entire assembly into the case using those vice grips. Hiram Rubiera's automatic transmissions, he has a video of 480E rebuild. He filmed that like 15 years ago, but he uses those very vice grips that I'm talking about. Alright, I'm going to install this. We'll set up the dial indicator. You know, I'll get the center support snap ring installed as well. That has to be in there. Do not install your feed bolt for the intermediate clutch. Leave that out for the measurements. Alright, and then once we have the dial indicator set up, we'll bring you back and we'll take a preliminary reading and see where we're at and where we need to be. Alright, dial indicator set up and zeroed. Now we're going to do a preliminary end plate check for the rear gear train. So I'm going to be using a fairly thick flat blade screwdriver. Want to insert it underneath the output shaft flange and simply pry up until you can't pry up anymore. And that's basically it. I admit I lied to you when I said I was going to use a 15 thou shim. I actually ended up going with a 20 thou shim. So I'll put a picture on the screen to show you exactly how this plunger is set up and all that good stuff, but let me make sure it's 100% zeroed before we begin. Alright, so that is 6 thousandths. Spec here is 5 to 25. So to get it all the way down, you're going to need to sometimes put a little pressure on the main shaft. So let's take another reading just to be sure. Yep, 6 thousandths. I'm good with minimal clearance in the back here. So that gives me more flexibility for what I need to do when it comes to the front end play. Front end play has to be greater than rear end play, and that is net of the travel or play you get between the snap ring that holds the input shaft to the overdrive carrier assembly. So again, if you want to learn more about that and what needs to be done, go ahead and watch either one of my 480E rebuild series videos, and I walk you through that entire process as far as netting it out, measuring the snap ring groove travel, and all that good stuff. Alright, so the last thing we need to do here is assemble the whole case, get everything situated as I need it to be, and then once we've done that, we'll go ahead and install that 3/8 of an inch cup plug, and that will conclude this video series on the CK Performance Master Recal Kit overview, installation, commentary, and all that good stuff. Alright, now that the gear train's in for the final time, we have the band in and all that good stuff, you know, fretting ring, bearings, shim, 20 thou. Go ahead and grab your forward clutch hub and install it onto the main shaft. And just spin the main shaft all around. Okay, you can spin it clockwise and counterclockwise, it doesn't matter, it'll flow in both directions. All you're really looking for is any bind ups. If you have a bind up, it's almost certainly a bushing that's just a little bit tight. So you just want to take the gear set back out, see what bushing is causing the trouble, and sand it down with a little bit of paper. 400 grit usually works. Alright, I totally forgot that this particular transmission already had a dual feed mod installed, so I'm going to move the camera and show you what was done, because it's actually a good option if you want to do it yourself, and that is the utilization of a set screw in place of that cup plug. So as you can see, the high reverse feed passage is already blocked off with this set screw, so there's actually no need to install the cup plug. Again, that's something I completely spaced on until I looked at the case, and when I went to install the center support to make sure everything was still aligned, bolt holes and the feed bolt and all that stuff, I realized that there was already a plug there. So All right, we're at the tail end here, home stretch. So if you made it this far in, thank you so much for watching. Of course, greatly appreciate all your viewership and you taking your valuable time and choosing to spend it on my channel. So, you know, that is always, always, always appreciated. Thank you for the support. All right, so we're gonna cover check balls, and I decided to take that little set screw out that was used to block the high reverse feed passage just to see exactly what they used. And so turns out it's an M12 150. So I'm not sure, to be honest, how much I like this idea using a set screw there. It kind of gouges the case a little bit, you know. Let me zoom in so you can get a better view of what I'm talking about. You know, you got some you know, thread scoring here on the sidewall before you get to the opening itself, and then it threads in just fine, but they did not use any sealant. So we're going to put a little RTV on the threads here before we go back with it. I'm going to zoom back out. Alright, so last thing we need to cover is check balls. So check ball configurations and considerations for 4L80Es are basically going to be as follows. The CK kit has you leave out the number 5 and 6 check ball. These are for the 2.3 and 3.4 accumulator respectively, because you simply don't need them in there. Okay. They have you reinstall all of the other check balls. This check ball here is the number 9 check ball. It is for low reverse. He has you leave it in, and I'm going to do the same. For really heavy duty towing, hauling, plowing, or what have you, working trucks, you may actually want to leave this out, especially if you're not installing this kit in general and you're only doing either a basic shift kit or, you know, just basically restoring its stock. You may want to leave this check ball out, and then if you're going to dual feed that direct clutch in this hypothetical heavy duty scenario I'm referring to, it might be a good idea to leave this check ball out. This is the direct clutch flow control check ball. Again, this is really only recommended for really heavy duty or really high stall, all out race type applications. So we're going to leave this check ball in and this check ball in, and then these other 4 check balls here, they have to be reinstalled. So I'll flash a diagram on the screen, or you may have already been looking at it, so that you can see exactly what check ball does, its function, and so forth, and, you know, just more information for you to take into account. So anyway, that is the CK Performance Master Recalibration Kit. We've went over the kit itself, kind of walked you through all of the different parts of the installation process. I discussed key considerations, gave some tips and pointers, showed you a few other things beyond the kit, just, you know, for your general awareness, because I felt that they were important, and, you know, take you through to the end so that you now have a very comprehensive understanding of what all goes into this kit, why you might want to consider it for your build, and a step-by-step procedural layout, if you will, so that you have something to follow in addition to Chris's instructions. Like I said, I'm going to get with him about the kit and you know, see if he wants to make any revisions as it relates to the direct clutch stack up. You know, he's a big proponent of using wavies, so I think that that may be something that he could incorporate into the evolution of this kit going forward. So again, I'll have that conversation with him. I didn't see any Torlon check balls in the package I received, so it could be they just didn't have any, but you can use steel or you can use Torlon. Torlon's ideal because it doesn't wear the separator plate as much, but steel's also perfectly fine. Alright guys, I really appreciate all of your time as always, and as mentioned, if you have any questions, comments, please go ahead and leave them below. If there's anything else you want me to cover when it comes to 4L80Es, don't hesitate to leave a comment to that effect, and I will do what I can to prioritize a video as soon as I can. So I'm always doing these transmissions. In fact, I have another one to do right after this one, and I'm going to be doing teardown inspection video on that one. That is an interesting case. It was built by a do-it-yourselfer, and he was having some line pressure issues once he had it all together and back in the vehicle. So we'll be kind of looking into that for him along with anything else. So alright guys, that's it. Once again, thanks so much for all of your time that you've spent on my channel. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and I hope to see you on the next one.